Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus. And today we're going to talk about false choices. Specifically, we're going to talk about NERC CIP-003-9, and we're going to talk about how some companies might choose to reduce functionality in order to stay compliant and how that is indeed a false choice. So what were the changes? So NERC CIP 3.9 added a bunch of things which came into effect a couple weeks ago. But the main things are it now applies to low impact connections. You have to have a bunch of things around vendor remote access. You have to understand when it's needed. You can't really have it just as an always on thing. It's a time of need based thing. You have to understand when there's a shared password involved and when you need to rotate it. And you have to be able to disable it pretty much right away. What they're trying to get to here is you can't just have an unknown set of people having access to an unknown set of things for an unlimited duration with no real controls. You need to be able to control who, what, where, when, and how. So this makes it a little bit complicated. Some companies might say, well, actually, this might not be worth it. Maybe we should just be compliant by turning this off or restricting dramatically the staff or what have you. So what are our options? And you might imagine some might overreact. We'll cut the VPN off. Maybe we'll just let people earn some more frequent flyer miles. We'll just add another shift. We'll pretend that progress is a bad thing and let's get rid of it. And we'll just have compliance at any cost. I'm here to tell you that there's really A, you've got no choice, and B, there's another way. So what's the simple need? The simple need is for any user, singular person, on any system, singular system, on any device, on any network, they need to be able to do what they need to do, when they need to do it, and where they need to do it. Not more, not less, with high simplicity and high security. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not everything. It's not all the time. It's not all the people. It's not all the resources. It's a subset of all of that. If you can achieve that, you can still be NERC CIP-003-9 compliant because that's what it says is who needs to do what when, and the who is a person, not a company, and the what is a thing, a singular thing, not the entire network. That's really what you want. So you want to be compliant, but you want to be able to achieve sort of what's on the right here. A vendor can have read-only access to a certain thing. Another vendor has read-write, you have read-write, and these are the individual resources, and it's okay from 9 to 5 today, but not tomorrow, and it's that person, but not this other person. So why do I say you actually don't have a choice? So, some people would say, well, maybe the risk isn't worth it. We'll just harden up the air gap and, call it a day. Well, things are getting more complicated. Managed remote operations, O&M is getting a lot more complicated because there's a lot more logic. The amount of PLCs, the amount of logic in each, the number of sensors, systems are getting more interconnected, environmental standards are getting tighter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You've got more real-time data. Level 0 and level 1, they're working harder than they've ever worked in your Purdue model. Efficiency is becoming more of a driver as well. You've got competitors. You don't want waste. Predictive analytics, you want to have data in the cloud, you want to have this, you want to have better mean time to repair. You can't walk away from this because it's a competitive world, and if you walk away from it and your competitors don't, you will go out of business. It's a competitive world. If you walk away from this, you'll no longer be compliant for some other reasons. You won't be able to meet those new constraints. You won't be able to hire the people. You won't be able to get your job done. You actually don't have a choice. The second one is SaaSification. So it used to be that you bought a piece of equipment, you owned the piece of equipment, the manufacturer did all the work on it before you bought it, you installed it, and you ran it for its lifetime. What's sort of blurred here along the way is you've got companies like John Deere that have effectively made tractor as a service. Their tractors, when I was a kid, tractor didn't have any electronics on it. You started it with a screwdriver and away you went, and that was it. Now they got 5G radio in it. You don't have the right to repair it. There's real-time sensors, etc. We saw this occur with other markets as well. The CD, when I started university, you were excited to go to the music store and browse through stacks of CDs. I don't think they exist anymore. Music as a service. We've seen this most famously maybe with Tesla. They ship a car and it's not quite done yet, and you get software updates every few days. And the Tesla fanboys, they love that. They're like, oh, look at this. This doesn't work. Oh, and, they actually made a positive out of a negative. You're seeing the same with industrial control systems. The debugging and shakedown occurs as much after as before the system integration task. Tweaking the timer, changing the settings, etc. It's an ongoing task here as opposed to a buy once, deliver, and continue waterfall model. So as a consequence, your NERC CIP low impact devices, they're starting to have cloud needs. They might have license managers in the cloud, they might have data they're reporting there, etc. And your air gap that blocks everything in and out no longer is an option for them. And the third one, which I've alluded to, is big data. You've got a lot of data, and people didn't used to think about, you know, IPPs or data being generated by wind farms, etc. But suddenly we're finding the value in the smallest amounts of data. It's variations in hertz and variations in voltage and stress on the motors. And, you're trying to delay when you do maintenance as long as possible, but keep it safe. You want to be able to take it out of service the second before it was going to fail rather than, 6 months just because it was a bathtub life cycle type of thing. So data's moved from being a monthly compliance report to a millisecond value driver. You're starting to see, talk about sending it to the cloud and Snowflake and those types of databases, where before the historian was largely historical in nature. As a consequence, there's a real-time pipe going in and out of these sites. And there might be a lot of these sites. Like, I've got this, little clearly AI-driven graphic, but of a wind generator with cables running straight into a data center first, but it's not that far off. So I guess what I'm saying is you can't unring the bell of progress. The users out there have an expectation, the manufacturers have an expectation, the world is working a certain way. You can't be the contrarian that goes entirely against it. Vendors are here to stay. You can't make your own stuff like AT&T did back in the day. Remote is here to stay. They can't be on your site. You've got too many sites. There's too specific needs. The skill sets are too narrow for any one person to have all of them. You can't afford it. And so you may as well switch your focus to increasing efficiency while increasing security. And I think you can do both. The people think that this is a trade-off. You can either be secure or simple, but not both. But I think that's a false positive or false assertion there. I think that we can be what's called non-zero sum, where you win and I win. Poker is zero sum. For you to win, I have to lose. But you can actually use the security features to increase your efficiency. Single sign-on is a good example. People complain about I've got a username and a password and a multi-factor for every different device. But if you have just one and it all signs you into all of them and it's equally secure, the end user is actually happier. It's way easy. I just click, it's biometric, it's this, it's that, it's done. If everything is the same as signing into your email, the end users are happier. Shared accounts is one of the things that you cannot have here. You cannot have a device on site that has a password in it that you rotate. There's no way to make that secure because you've got too many different people and you'd have to tell them all. And if one of them leaves on bad terms, you're worried about something and you're worried about some malware being able to guess that, etc. You have to get rid of this concept of shared local accounts and make everything be cloud-based, single sign-on, logging in with your credentials the same way you log in your email. So you sign into Microsoft Entra, gives you your Office 365, it gives you your email, it gives you access to the HMI. Your partner who works for a different company, they sign into their email, they sign into their Office 365, and in doing so, they're also signed into, you guessed it, your HMI. You didn't create a shared account in your system for their company or them. That's what you need to solve. And then coincidentally, that's what Agilica solves for you. So getting rid of the need for shared accounts, moving everything to single sign-on means that you can actually achieve the objectives of NERC CIP-003-9 in a much simpler fashion. And what it does is it moves identity to be the firewall. Instead of it being packet-based, a packet has arrived on this port, should I send it? Which is sort of what a VPN or port forwarding would do. Or instead of it just sort of moving the perimeter like a jump box boxes are really terrible. You go to all this trouble to see who can get on the jump box, and the jump box can do anything in your environment. Yes, I know you can put minor firewalls after it, but people don't. That jump box, it's the keys to your entire kingdom. You wouldn't let somebody walk around your plant without you around to watch. Why would you let them on the jump box? The identity is the new firewall here. And that's where you want to be thinking about this split of ownership where your partners own authentication of their users. They own who works for them, but you own authorization, what they're allowed to do. And if we can make those two things work together, we can make an equation that works really well for everybody. And that's recognizing that what could be viewed as an identity battleground can actually become a common ground. It becomes a battleground when what you do is you say, well, I've created an account for each person working for me, shadow accounts or shared accounts. So a shared account means there's one for the company. Here's the Siemens account. Siemens maintains my wind farm. There's a lot of people work for Siemens. Are you sure that you really want to do that? You're not giving it to a person, you're giving it to 600,000 people. But shadow accounts, you create a contractor dash X at my domain, and now you're responsible for the password reset flow. You're responsible for knowing when they leave their company. You're responsible for all that. There's no reason to. It's not actually increasing your security, it's decreasing your security. But it's also bad for that person. They're like, oh, geez, I got all these passwords to remember. I'll just share them. I'll make them the same. You're actually increasing your risk. Little known fact, the average person has something like 110 passwords, but there's only 88 words in Wonderwall, which is now going through your head. Think about memorizing a song and having those passwords everywhere. It's too much work for them. So they write it down or they share it. And you don't want that. So the problem is we view this incorrectly. We view, I have a new thing, therefore I need a new password. But instead, we should view it as every person is their identity, and they just need to authenticate their identity once. And then whether they're authenticating their identity for using one of my resources or one of the ones at another customer of theirs, it doesn't matter. I own the authorization. Based on that identity, I decide what they're allowed to do. So what you really want here is to allow their companies to attest their identity via authentication, single sign-on, Entra, Google Workspace, Okta, those types of tools. And then you want to manage the authorization. So if you get into this battleground here, you end up with bad things occurring, and you end up with stale accounts that people have forgotten, and nobody really knows who has the password to it, and it's only a password. They can't do multi-factor for different reasons. If you recognize that you actually have a shared outcome, a shared destiny here, then you get into a better spot. So you meet your partners at authentication, you let them attest who they are, you manage what they're allowed to do, and you each now view the problem a different way. So instead of the vendor viewing it as, oh my God, yet another customer of mine who's different, I'm gonna have to write down a mop, I'm gonna have a internal virtual machine that we remote desktop into that has their software on it. This is how it's done, by the way. You say, well, I've got my VPN, they got 30 customers. You can't have 30 different VPNs on their laptop. So they create a VM that runs in their office, and any user in their office they can get on that can get on your network. You don't want this. So the industry as a whole got together and we created this term for it called zero trust. Zero trust, big set of standards for NIST, small set of things. It's very simple. 3 swim lanes. The who problem, who are you? If you know who a person is, down to an individual person, not a company, that's identity, that's who. The second is what. If you know what an individual person is allowed to do, that's called authorization. And if you know how to get them to your network, that's called access. If you have that solved where an individual person can have an individual role on an individual resource, then you have zero trust. Things that aren't zero trust are like a jump box. You've got TeamViewer or remote desktop, and the user signs into that and has access to everything. That's not zero trust. A VPN is not zero trust because you sign to the VPN as access to the whole network. That's not zero trust. But zero trust is being able to say Dawn at Agilicus has read-only access to HMI 17. That's zero trust. And it's actually quite simple. It sounds really complicated and there's a little bit of provisioning involved, but from an end user standpoint, it's easy. They open up a web interface, there's an icon for all the stuff they're allowed to use, they click on it, it does what they want. The firewall then handles fine-grained roles like read-only and read-write, or only during these hours or from the GYP. But authorization is not just a Boolean on-off, it's role-based. What am I allowed to do on that resource? It's easier for the end user, it's easier for you, it's easier to audit. And going back to NERC CIP-003-9, it's actually what they asked you to do. You want to be able to say which vendor needs what, when, under what circumstances, and how do I disable them? Boom. Those 2 left columns, they can disable their users. That person got fired. They don't work for me anymore. You can disable them. The middle column, okay, only during these hours or no longer, etc. And it's instantaneous. There isn't the worry of a shared password that a bunch of people might have access to. It can also do what's called password stuffing. So sometimes you have these things in the environment like VNC, and it has a built-in password and it's really weak. It's 8 characters, there's no username, it's not encrypted, and you're like, oh my God, should I be rotating this? Who do I tell to? With a system like ours, they supply their proper credentials on the left and we just inject that on the right, which means you don't have to rotate it, which means you can kick somebody out without having to go visit all the equipment. Or when you do visit all the equipment, you don't have to go tell all the people. You can rotate it without telling them. Way easier. So mapping this back to the needs of the standard, the spec, which you're bound by, is just think of these items. People sign in, not companies. So it's not the GE account, it's the Joe at GE account. Get people to sign with their corporate credentials. It's Joe at GE, not Joe_GE at my company. Don't do that. You authorize actions per person. You don't say GE can access the thing. You say Joe can access the thing. You get rid of jump boxes. You don't say this box can get to anything and then therefore anyone can get to this box and get to anything. Get rid of that thing. You don't have a VPN. You don't say, oh, but use Cisco AnyConnect and here's an IP address inside this magical Bastion network, and once you're there, you can do anything you want. You get rid of that. You authorize as needed. So there's a request flow. The user says, I would like access. You get a push as admin. Yeah, okay, it matches this. Or you decide in advance, okay, the maintenance window is 4 to 5 next Friday. Or you do it on a specific needs basis, the outbound to the cloud. That device was generating data to Snowflake and Amazon, is able to do that all the time, but that's the only thing they can leave and nothing can come back in. And you deauthorize as needed. You end the session early, or you take the user out of the authorization table and say they no longer are in that group, or whatever you need to do. It makes it simple. And you get rid of those local shared accounts and credentials entirely. And then all your audits are tied to a single person plus resource. It's so much easier to say for compliance, yep, I said Joe at GE could access this, and I see that the only access was from Joe at GE, and it was only during the hours we said. So the conclusion, talked about a bunch of stuff, but basically what I'm proposing is standards changes can be an opportunity to become more efficient and remain compliant at the same time. And sometimes it's just reimagining the problem. So instead of imagining the problem of vendor access as the vendor has access, you imagine it as the people. And instead of saying access as an on-off, you say access is the role at the resource, read-only HMI 17. Identity is the new firewall, the new air gap. So you now have to be thinking about that's the main criteria. My firewall is if dawn and access as opposed to if access. You can be more secure and simpler to use at the same time. And efficiency and security can be friends, not enemies or not frenemies. So with that, thank you very much. My team's going to reach out to you after this. I appreciate your time today, and